Okay, everybody, welcome to the Tuesday Direction video. Today we got some more notes on the War of 1812. Kind of our last day talking about it. So obviously we're actually coming down to the end of our unit here, which is good because we're almost through Jefferson here. Obviously we'll see a little change in presidency during this kind of unit here. But yeah, we're wrapping up, guys. So it feels good. So let's dive into these War of 1812 unit notes here. You read about it yesterday. We watched kind of the video on it yesterday, so we should be somewhat familiar on what's going on. All right, so here we go. So Jefferson's foreign policy, again, he wanted to be more of an isolationist. He wanted to not get entangled in European wars, but easier said than done. Okay, so it is impossible to avoid foreign affairs. American merchants engaged in trade all over the world, so we were becoming economic. I would say we're visual. We're dealing with a lot of countries. How about that? All over the world, so we're very visible. We're interacting with a lot of people. Okay. So that's part one. Part two, Louisiana Purchase opened country to the westward expansion. So we're moving west. There's different Native American groups out there, even like on the west coast, like Oregon and California, right? There's other countries over there doing their thing, kind of colonizing. So we're definitely going to be interacting with a lot of different groups. And normally during this time period, if you're interacting with a group for a certain amount of time period, you're going to end up fighting each other for something. All right, so problems with France and England. All right, British did not want Americans to supply food to their enemies, basically. So England and France are fighting right now. Okay, so they're fighting right now, and we are basically trying to make money off of both sides while they fight. This is a very common American practice. Starts in 1812. We do it at the beginning of World War One. We try to kind of do it at the beginning of World War II, but that's kind of that's been our MO, is basically sit back, join late. Anyways, here we go. So problems with France and England. British did not want Americans to supply food to their enemies, basically France. So Britain set up partial blockades. Only some American ships sail to Europe. Basically, they're cutting off our ability to sell stuff to other countries, and that is what makes many Americans mad. Right? We're producing the stuff. Normally, we can sell it to anybody, but thanks to these new blockades, some of our merchants are not making as much money, which obviously upsets people. And if you're upsetting the merchant class, kind of the higher up, the elite in society, normally something gets done. If you're going to make the lower class people mad, normally nothing gets done. All right? So they kind of pissed off the wrong part of society. For France, France is angry at us. Basically, American shippers, difficult position. Either way, it might be seized. So Britain has their whole blockade coming up, taking our troops and all that. And then France starts to do the exact same thing. So we're kind of in a rock and a hard place. Basically, we're just getting bullied by France and England in their navy. And our navy's not that strong. And our shipments and our army isn't that strong. So we try to just kind of sit back and we just kind of ignore it at first. Not ignore it, but we're not really strong enough to fight back, is what Jefferson's saying. So if we're not able to fight back militarily, we're going to try to fight back economically. All right, so the first thing we do, jot this down, is we're going to pass the Embargo Act of 1807. Okay, so American ships no longer sail to foreign ports, and American ports are closed to British ships. Okay, so this is what the Embargo Act is. Let's jot down the two parts. Part one, no ships are going to sail to foreign ports. And part two, no British ships are going to be allowed in American ports. So kind of a twofer, all right? Well, turns out not a good idea, okay? It was a total disaster, and because it mostly hurt the United States. So the Embargo Act normally is supposed to affect the other countries, right? That's the whole idea of it. But in this case, it kind of 180'd on us, and it really hurt us. And it hurt American farmers. It hurt merchants, a lot of Southerners, because they're basically a lot of them are farmers at this time. Westerners, shippers, and New Englanders. Basically, everybody in our country that could be affected is affected, okay? Because we're not able to really sell anything abroad. So the farmers who have surplus and will, pack it up and send it overseas and sell it, they can't do that. Merchants, people who are trying to sell stuff, can't sell anything because they're not allowed to. It just ends up hurting our economy disastrously, to put it bluntly. All right. So the election of 1808, the embargo becomes a major issue. Everyone's kind of blaming Jefferson for what happened here with the embargo. This kind of lets the door open up for a guy named James Madison, and he's able to become the fourth president. So Madison's going to be kind of running the country, obviously, during the War of 1812. All right, so Madison takes over, and then we get the introduction of this vocab word called war hawks. Okay, now anti-British feelings grew in the South and also the West, basically the farmers were. They are demanding a war with Britain. Few think the war hawks also, besides wanting to get kind of revenge on Britain for what they've done with the impressment, they also wanted selfishly more land so that they could obviously have more land to farm, right? More land equals more money equals more influence, okay? So the goal here for the Warhawks is let's go to war with Britain again, and this time we're not going to fight about independence, we're going to fight over Canada. Because if we can get Canada, that's a whole, if you think about that, if America had Canada now, we would be a massive, massive country, right? We're already pretty big, but we would be absolutely monstrous. And that's what these Southerners and these Westerners wanted. Like, look at all this open land, we could farm forever. All right, so New Englanders, merchants and businessmen, they opposed the war because they were more reliant on trade with Britain to make their money. So obviously, if we go to war with Britain, their ability to make money stops. So our country split on these lines. You're going to have the war hawks who want to go to war, and on the other side, normally in history, so you have the war hawks who want to go to war. On the other side, they're called doves, like peace, and so the merchants and businessmen will be considered the doves of the time, right? Like the bird at weddings, you let it go. It's supposed to symbol of peace. So in political terms, we call the war hawks people who are in favor of war. We call people who are against the war doves. All right, so eventually, let's just dive in here. All right, the causes of the War of 1812, British arming natives in the Ohio River Valley, right? This will be fought over before with the French and Indian War, was the Ohio River Valley. So it becomes a pretty important spot. So we're basically having all these other wars, like the 7 Years' War, all that good stuff, kind of coming back. All right. So we have the natives in the Ohio River Valley, obviously armed and are causing skirmishes, and then we have the British impressment of American sailors to help fight Napoleon in their own war with the French. All right, so British began kidnapping or impressing American sailors to work on British ships. About 6,000 Americans get impressed throughout the entirety of kind of this whole war situation. And again, the British are fighting us in the War of 1812, but they're also fighting Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars at the exact same time. And they need more sailors. And so if you can't recruit your own sailors, you just steal from other countries. And that's what they did to us. All right, so the United States military was weak when the war began. We only had 16 ships. We had fewer than 7,000 poorly trained men, little equipment, and inexperienced officers. Basically, the exact same situation we were in prior to the start of the American Revolution. All right, the battles are concentrated around some interesting spots. We got the Great Lakes, Washington, D.C., Louisiana, and Mississippi. That's where the majority of the battles of the War of 1812 took place, as you can kind of see here. Again, one of the big interesting parts about the War of 1812 is the burning of Washington, D.C. British troops marched into the city. Dolly Madison, who's the First Lady, she was actually pretty brave, and when the troops were coming in, she was able to grab all important papers. She's also able to grab this famous painting of George Washington. She literally left the White House like minutes before the British troops showed up. Now, that's the story in history. Who knows? But it definitely makes for a more exciting story if we say that she just made it out. But who knows? But yeah, she's able to grab all these important things and able to leave the White House before the British start to burn it down. All right, British troops burned the executive mansion and the Capitol. And then once they were done with that, they started to move on, and they were going to attack this fort called Fort McHenry in Baltimore. All right, and at the Battle of Fort McHenry, we get a very important piece in American culture that gets created. So the commander of Fort McHenry requested a large flag so the British will have no difficulty seeing it. So the American flag flew high at the Battle of Fort McHenry, when we're going to have one of these amazing battles between the Americans and the British. And here is one of our key things of today. A man named Francis Scott Key is detained on a British ship. He's watching the all-night battle, and the next morning he is so prideful and he's so kind of struck with emotion, and he's a songwriter, so he's going to write a new song, and it becomes our national anthem. He writes the Star Spangled Banner while he's watching the Battle of Fort McHenry. All right, so the bombs bursting in air, all that stuff, right? That's him just kind of basically jotting down what he's seeing with the battle that's taking place in front of him. So that's important. Let's write this down. This will be on our quiz. Francis Scott Key and the Star Spangled Banner is created. The Battle of New Orleans, the British prepared to cut New Orleans, cut off Americans' trade to Mississippi, but there's a man there named Andrew Jackson who's waiting for him. Jackson has American soldiers. He also has some pirates that are on his side. These are more of the Navy side of things, but we're for real here. The Americans did side with pirates to help defeat the British. It's an interesting story, but it's a true story. All right, so the Battle of New Orleans is kind of it's an interesting battle because I'll just kind of finish it up and I'll kind of give the story later. Jackson's men dug trenches to defend themselves. British soldiers charged the American trenches. More than 2,000 British soldiers died. Only 70 Americans died. But the interesting thing is the Battle of New Orleans took place 2 weeks after the peace treaty was signed. But it just took so long to get the news back that we actually fought it anyways. So a lot of people credit the peace treaty being signed thanks to Andrew Jackson's decisive Battle of New Orleans. So for people in America at the time, they said without the Battle of New Orleans, we would never have the peace treaty. Who's this Andrew Jackson's guy? I love him. Okay, without him, the war would still be waging. But we know that's not true. All right. So, final most deadly battle for the British. Andrew Jackson becomes a hero, even though the battle took place after the treaty was signed. All right, so after the battle, the Treaty of Ghent gets signed in Ghent, Belgium, signed December 24th, 1814, ended the War of 1812. None of the issues causing the war were addressed. Nothing was adjusted. Nothing was settled. Returned to matters as if the war never happened. So at the end of the war, the treaty, no one gets anything. No one loses anything except for Native Americans. They lost a lot of men, people, and obviously this would kind of be their last chance of keeping the American people and the government away. So from this moment onward, westward expansion continues, and it's kind of the beginning of the end for like the Native American way of life as they knew it. All right. So after the war, though, one of the big consequences or outcomes was it's a new era gets created. It's called the Era of Good Feelings. All right, so Americans were prideful in their country. The people were now more American than ever. They felt united as a nation. So the Era of Good Feelings, the time after the War of 1812, where people were not divided over politics or any other issues or war. Everyone was on the same side, and patriotism grew out of it. All right, the effects of the Era of Good Feeling increased American patriotism, weakened Native American resistances. U.S. manufacturing grew. The last big piece here is called the Monroe Doctrine. Let's jot this down. Was issued by President James Monroe in 1823. It was actually written by his Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams. Let the world know that the U.S. was now the protector of the Western Hemisphere. No more colonizing in North America, Latin America, or South America. The U.S. would not interfere with European affairs, and thus Europe should not interfere with American affairs. The U.S. was prepared to take its place among the most powerful nations in the world. Basically, we cut off Canada, modern-day Canada, modern-day America, modern-day South America, Mexico, anything down there. Basically, we cut the ocean in half, the Atlantic Ocean, and said, this is our side, don't worry about us, and we're not going to worry about you on your side there, the right side of the ocean, the east side, the European side, as you can see here. Right. Sorry, fellows, this Western Hemisphere is off limits. You mean no more colonies? Nope, sorry, we're cutting off the Atlantic Ocean, kind of sending everyone back. But yep, that's our notes, guys. This video is going to end in 10 seconds according to my free trial. So hopefully you guys got a lot of stuff down, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.